You may have some questions regarding the subject of this video. Firstly, what? And trust me, we'll get to that. But also, why? Why? With all the great anime from this year and last that I could be talking about, and all the more relevant trash for that matter, have I chosen to cover the most crusty, cookie-cutter mid-2000s harem anime that nobody's ever heard of? Two reasons. The first is academic. To a scholar of harem history like myself, Maburaho represents one of the earliest successful attempts to distill the original story concepts seen in Love Hina, Tokimeki Memorial, Ranma, and Tenchi Muyo into an endlessly repeatable, factory-assemblable gotta-bang-em-all marketing formula, where characters with personalities gave way to copy-pasted gimmick deres distinguished primarily by their hairstyles, and the concept of a joke followed by a punchline was likewise replaced by an accidental boob touch followed by a punch, or sometimes an explosion. Thus, by roasting Maburaho, I can effectively roast every pre-isekai harem anime at the same time. But really, that's just an excuse to cover for my second reason, which is spite. Pure, unadulterated spite. See, I discovered Maburaho back in the anime Dark Ages, long before simulcasts, when the only way a Canadian kid could watch anime that wasn't on TV or at Blockbuster was to buy a very overpriced DVD or box set from one of the few stores that even stocked anime. I don't know what it is, but something about this here yellow box set caught my eye on a shelf at Indigo Books one day, and having read a positive-sounding preview in Anime Insider magazine, I decided to give it a shot. In the process, I learned a valuable lesson about why you should never trust previews. But, having already spent 80 whopping allowance bucks on this crap, I wasn't about to just not watch it. I mean, it's bad, but it's not Final Fantasy Unlimited bad. I couldn't even get past the first disc of this shit, but we can talk about that another trash day. Point is, I allowed Maburaho to waste not just a significant chunk of my money, but a significant chunk of my time on this earth, which I'm increasingly aware with every passing day I will never get back. The money, though, can be recouped with the help of Google AdSense and a Bookwalker sponsorship. So today I'm gonna waste a little bit more of my time, one last time, to share my pain with all of you. That's gonna include dub clips, by the way. If I had to hear them, so do you. But to put that pain off for just a merciful second longer, allow me to tell you about Bookwalker, Kadokawa's official ebook store where you can buy thousands of high-res English-language manga and light novels for easy reading on your phone, tablet, or PC. Now, Bookwalker does not have the original Maburaho light novels, nor would I recommend them if they did, but what they do have is the classic reverse isekai The Devil is a Part-Timer, and until March 29th, to celebrate the final volume dropping, they're offering 40% coin back on volume 1 of the light novel and manga, or 30% coin back on the entire series when you buy it as a bundle. Until March 10th, they're also offering 45% coin back on the first 3 volumes of top-tier shoujo and josei titles, including Wotakoi, Fruits Basket, Ascendance of a Bookworm, My Next Life as a Villainess, Princess Jellyfish, Skull-Faced Bookseller Honda-san, and so much more. And remember, those sweet deals get all the sweeter if you use the promo code BASEMENT for a 600 yen discount when you check out. Alright, that was the ad. I hope you enjoyed it, because those are the last remotely good stories you're going to hear about for at least the next 10 minutes. Kazuki Shikimori, or Kazuki Shikimori, or Kazuki Shikimori, or look, it's an early 2000s ADV dub. They pronounce it a lot of ways. Point is, our protagonist, seen here spouting the early 2000s equivalent of Kirito hair and 0 other identifiable features, is an ordinary guy in an extraordinary world that looks a lot like ours, except that every human there is born with the ability to cast magic a set number of times in their lifetime. Once you cast your last spell, however, your body instantly crumbles to ash, so that number's pretty darn important. It effectively determines a person's standing in society, with the most powerful magical families also holding dominion over business and government. The average person gets a few dozen spells in their lifetime, while students at the prestigious Aoi Academy, and the graduates who go on to be business leaders and politicians, have spell counts in the tens of thousands. Kazuki's is 8, and he's so insecure about that he runs away from school physicals. I wonder if the guy who wrote this owns a big car. Anyway, despite that, Kazuki did get into the aforementioned elite magic academy that trains all the business folk and bureaucrats in the world, all thanks to his wise teachers who understand that sometimes it's what's inside that counts. Specifically, what's inside his balls. As it turns out, Kazuki can trace his lineage back to pretty much every great magician in the history of East Asia, not to mention all of the great mages of Europe through his Polish grandmother. And while the little guy's magic may not be all that potent, his little guys are as potent as they come. Every time he makes Shinzo Abe proud, Kazuki's loins are all but guaranteed to spawn one of the most powerful designer baby sorcerers in history. So naturally, 3 of the biggest magic syndicates in Japan have all sent their moeest daughters to take his hand, first all over their bodies in a series of absurd accidents, then, eventually, in marriage. To my knowledge, this is the first time a harem anime ever chose to answer the eternal harem question of, but why would all of these unfathomably hot ladies be jonesing for that human bowl of oatmeal with, because eugenics? It would not be the last. And rest assured, that is far from the only horrifying thing about this anime. On that note, let's talk about them waifus! Maburaho's core cast will be instantly recognizable to anyone with my specific mental problems as a textbook example of the standard harem template. You got the childhood friend, pink variant, who is vocally obsessed with our protagonist from the start of the story and gets violently jealous when other girls hit on him. The quiet, intense one, purple variant, who wants to do a violence to get this stupid, worthless man out of her hair until she eventually falls for him, and the horny one, blonde variant, who is horny. On top of this base set, new waifus are added every arc or so to keep the audience engaged in the exact same way Pokemon does for small children. These Gen 2 waifus include childhood friend Brown variant, who is secretly obsessed with the protagonist from the start of the story and tries to play it cool when other girls hit on him, the broody, insane one, Black variant, who shows up to make some plot and a mediocre action scene happen once per episode in the exact same way Team Rocket does in Pokemon, and an actual, literal child, blonde variant, who shows up in the last 30 seconds of the show to declare that she will also marry the protagonist, whom she actually literally just met. And rest assured, that is far from the only horrifying thing about the end of this anime, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Of course, there is more to all of these girls than the molds they so cleanly fit into. Not a lot more, but what more there is, sure is a fucking lot. Like, when I said that the pink one, Yuna Miyama, is obsessed with Kazuki, I mean that she breaks into his dorm room and declares herself to be his wife, and that is how he's introduced to her. Well, outside of their one shared childhood friend memory, Hazy Forgotten variant, of course, wherein he met her on a bridge when she was sad because her dad had to move for work, and she wanted to see snow, so he used one of his spells that will literally kill him when they run out to make it snow in summer for her, and then she promised to marry him. By the way, I may have slightly fudged the lore for the sake of wordplay earlier. Despite not having much of it, Kazuki's magic is, in fact, extremely potent. Like, potent enough to destroy the entire planet, according to the show's designated guy who knows everything. Basically, he's got 8 Dragon Ball wishes stored up inside him, the power to do literally anything he wants. And if you thought Goku and his buddies squandered that opportunity, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, you might think this past connection justifies Yuna's very, forward approach to wooing Kazuki, and yeah, the revelation does make her seem a little less insane, relatively speaking, for a while, but as she gets closer to him, she also gets more Possessive really seems like a gross understatement here. Let me put it this way. By the end of the show, seeing Kazuki say good morning to their dorm manager is enough to send Yuna into a literally explosive rage. It's helpful to think of her less like a full human character in her own right, and more like a cute anime mascot that occasionally does violence for laughs. Specifically, a Pikachu, because a good half of the episodic villain plots are just ploys to separate her and Kazuki, and also she knows Thundershock. Next up, Rin Kamishiro, the quiet, intense purple one, is the opposite of Yuna, in that she starts out hating Kazuki, and that's why she wants to kill him. Rin definitely acts the craziest out of the three girls at first, what with that big katana she's always swinging all over the place, but she does come from a very strict, controlling, traditional family, and she's already got a crush on a different senpai, so it is a bit more understandable for her to be reacting the way that she does to what's essentially an arranged marriage that's going to determine the course of the rest of her life. And she does tone it down in just a few episodes, right after she catches feelings for Kazuki. In other words, Rin is probably the least dangerous one of these waifus overall, and she spends the first few episodes literally trying to stab our hero. Also, she's a racist.
They are being punished for switching to Western magic. They are getting just what they deserve.
Which is a pretty bad character trait, and would, in most shows, cement her as worst girl, except for the fact that the blonde one, Kuriko Kazetsubaki, is one of the few words in the English language worse than a racist, and also just one letter off from it.
Enough foreplay. It'll all be over soon, so just keep quiet, okay, little boy?
Stop it! I'll call for
That's
help!
supposed to be the girl's line. Don't fight. It'll feel good soon, so relax.
Kuriko's personality is that she's rich and also thirsty, and did I mention rich? Also big boobs. And her character develops in such a way that eventually, Kazuki no longer needs external help to stop her from trying to violate him on good days. Her job within the anime's narrative, aside from filling the jiggle physics quota, of course, is to show up and make some plot and a mediocre action scene happen once per episode, like Team Rocket, before they hire that other girl to do that in the back half. So, all things considered, Kazuki's romantic prospects ain't the best. But at least he's got friends, right? Yeah, about that, everyone in his class is a sociopath. When Yuna first introduces herself to the class as Kazuki's wife, all the boys immediately start trying to lynch him for getting with a pretty girl, and then they get even more murdery when all the other waifus start clinging to him shortly thereafter. Which is pretty bizarre behavior already, but at least that's like an established trope of the harem genre. When the school doctor explains the whole magic eugenics situation to the class, the girls start getting mad too, only they're mad at Yuna because it's unfair of her to, quote, monopolize Kazuki's precious, white gold. Then, the next episode, the whole class puts him on trial and declares that they will not recognize his marriage to Yuna, and also it's illegal for them to date or even talk to each other, that's not how people act. Also, look, guy who wrote this, I don't know if you've ever talked to a teenage girl before, definitely do not start now, but you know that nobody wants to get teen pregnant, right? In terms of character designs, Kazuki's classmates collectively represent the full spectrum of early 2000s anime archetypes. Their class lineup looks more like the cover of a how to draw manga book than a light novel illustration, but as far as characterization goes, they're all pretty much the exact same greedy, spiteful, shitty person with a different haircut and maybe a gimmick if they're lucky. The girls all want Kazuki's genes inside of them. The guys all want to get inside of Yuna's gene. God damn it, she only wears skirts. I can't make that pun. But above all, every member of Class 2B is driven by a simple desire for cold, hard cash. Especially the two class ringleaders, Matsuda on the girls' side and Nakamaru on the boys', whose job is to show up once an episode and cause a plot and mediocre action scene to happen if the characters who normally fill that role are unavailable. Otherwise, they and the rest of the class simply provide, quote, comic, unquote, relief with their crazy get-rich-quick schemes. And they get away with pretty much every scheme because their teacher, best girl by default Kaori Iba, simply does not give a single shit about what they do. Her character essentially boils down to one gag, but it's a really damn good gag. Namely, what if the person secretly playing Game Boy in class was the teacher? Wait, my mistake, that's actually a WonderSwan color. Sensei's got taste, as all best girls should. Also big boobs, and she's a vampire. And as the anime's designated guy who knows everything, school doctor Haruaki Akai of course recognizes Iba Sensei's undisputed best girl status, which is why he's constantly committing HR violations at her.
Oh, Miss Iba. The beds in the nurse's office are open. How about coming by on your break?
No, thank you.
The bed we just had delivered is really nice.
Oh, sure it is.
So, Miss Kaori, this new bed I just got is truly amazing. You want to come try it out?
No, thanks. I think I'll give it a pass.
His job within the narrative, besides knowing all the exposition, is sitting in his office waiting for the main characters to show up so he can make some plot and a mediocre action scene happen like Team Rocket. And he does this mainly by being the most grossly irresponsible educator in the history of anime. Like, this one time he gets a bottle of what is essentially magic smallpox in the mail, and he just leaves it unattended on his desk in the nurse's office on a day when he knows Yuna is coming to collect the bottle of potion that he was also supposed to get in the mail from the same return address. Now, it might seem like I've just spent an inordinate amount of time telling you all about Maburaho's characters without really covering any of its story, but that's only because it doesn't really have one. What Maburaho has is a formula, some stock character archetypes, and a handful of easily repeatable jokes and fan service setups, all of which can be mixed and matched in pretty much any which way you want until you have 20 minutes of vaguely watchable television. Story never enters into it. Typically, an episode will start with Yuna and Kazuki hanging out, though he could also be hanging with Kuriko or Rin. Then within a few minutes, the other two will show up out of nowhere to either fight or also hang out with them. Then the, quote, comedy, unquote, ensues with a variety of setups such as Kazuki touches a lady and a lady touches Kazuki, but always the same punchline, which is violence. Eventually, those shenanigans are interrupted when this week's designated plot causer appears to make a plot happen, and then our heroes use their do-anything magic to solve it in a mediocre action scene. The supporting cast members and waifu of the week may change, but this basic episode outline remains constant through most of the series. Now, to be clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with formulaic writing in and of itself. Many of the greatest works in animation history are built on formulas. Just look at the Looney Tunes. But whether it's a harem comedy, a chase cartoon, or a Phineas and Ferb episode, when you utilize an established formula, you need to recognize that your audience is guaranteed to see your jokes coming. Thus, in order to get a laugh, you need to surprise them, either by subverting the gag or by putting a unique creative spin on it. Maburaho was a moderately passable harem comedy back in 2003, when the formula was still relatively fresh, but the older it's gotten, the more anime have done the exact same things it does, only better. In fact, Maburaho was rendered totally obsolete as a piece of entertainment as early as 2005, because that's when A. Aoki, the man who would go on to create Recreators, Id Invaded, and Fate Zero, decided to make his directorial debut with the most harem anime ever, Girls Bravo. If you were to judge these two series solely by their covers, I'd honestly be impressed if you could even tell them apart. And the original Girls Bravo manga isn't really all that remarkable. It's just another cookie-cutter harem story that most directors would have half-assed for a quick buck the way they did with Maburaho. But Aoki is not most directors. He never brings anything less than his entire ass to a project, even a doomed one like Aldnoah Zero, and he took that Girls Bravo adaptation to a whole other level. To show you what I mean, here's how Maburaho approaches a standard harem gag template of tense situation, girls make a thing explode, protagonists get hurt.
I am Katsuki's true wife and I will protect him!
All told, a functional joke. The timing works and the animation is decent, even if it's a gag you've seen a dozen times before. But now, compare that to this.
You're about to become entirely mine!
It's nice again today.
What's going on?
An explosion?
From a big firecracker!
Yukinari!
Kinda speaks for itself. Aoki knows that when you work with material like this, you either go big or go home. Girls Bravo goes big. Maburaho puts in the bare minimum and hopes you'll stick around for the sexy eye catches. That said, the Maburaho anime does at least know how to create the illusion of an overarching story by adding a new trope or two to the formula rotation every 6 or 7 episodes, and using Kazuki's magic level as a countdown of sorts to its mid-season two-parter, in which he sacrifices the last of his magic charges to save Yuna from the aforementioned magic smallpox, and in the process becomes a ghost. But Geoff, you object, I thought you said it didn't have a story. The main character dying is clearly story. That's so much story, and you'd think so, but no. In regards to how it actually affects the direction of a typical Maburaho episode, the only meaningful difference that being dead has on Kazuki's character is it gives him something new to whine about, and now Kuriko needs magic, but still not consent, to jump him like a poorly trained dog. In the first half of the series, Kazuki starts out whining about having no magic and too many bitches, then he gradually loosens up and starts having fun while said bitches are busy figuring out how to increase his spell count, then a sad, gray episode hits out of nowhere like lost.jpg in the middle of a webcomic binge, and he dies. In the second half of the series, Kazuki starts off whining about being dead and not being able to touch his bitches, then gradually loosens up a bit and starts having fun while said bitches figure out how to get his body back, then a sad gray episode hits out of nowhere like lost.jpg in the middle of a webcomic binge, and then it takes a sharp turn into the realm of existential horror, but again, getting ahead of myself. And in case you were thinking, okay, well, there's gotta at least be some story to why Kazuki uses up his magic, you would be, again, wrong. His reasons for literally killing himself in the space of a few weeks by burning through 8 charges of literally god-tier power range from, I hurt a girl's feelings and don't know how to use my words, so I'ma just mess with the forces of nature instead, to a girl dropped a bento box she worked really hard on, so I reversed time to catch it. Nakamaru and his cronies are also responsible for him burning through 2 spells with their dumbass schemes when Kazuki has to blast away a city-killing monster cat that they were hiding in a locker so they could sell it on the black market, and in a later episode he has to destroy a big man-eating slime monster that his classmates summoned into brunette childhood friends culture festival play as just a prank bro on their class who they consider to be rivals because they get good grades. When I called them all sociopaths, I really meant it. There's no real storytelling going on here, no sense that anything that happens is connected through consistent characterization or even basic causality. It's just a bunch of random stuff happening until the episode and then show are eventually over. I would genuinely not be surprised if someone told me the whole anime was outlined in Mad Libs. Take episode 3, for example. In it, Kazuki's daily home invasion life with Yuna is interrupted when another uninvited guest moves in with them, or should I say, an uninvited ghost?
Like a spooky ghost!
Said ghost is named Elizabeth, and some real estate agents kicked her out of the mansion she was haunting, so she decided to unlive in Kazuki's dorm completely at random, and now refuses to leave unless they either get her house back, which proves to be impossible since this week's designated plot causer Kuriko is the realtor and Kazuki refuses to trade sex for a house with her, or they have to recover a suit of armor from the Holy Roman Empire that Elizabeth left in the house. But then, as they're going to get the armor, Kuriko has Rin demolish the entire house with her sword about 0.2 seconds before they arrive, so of course the ghost gets mad and sucks Yuna into a very early stock digital animation effect where she tickles her, but from the outside that sounds like torture to Kazuki, so in a panic, he uses his magic to rip open the pocket dimension and save Yuna, and then also for some reason that causes the boys and girls dorms to fuse into one building, and now his room connects directly to Yuna's. Then Kuriko comes to dig the ghost out of the rubble, and instead of getting mad at her, Elizabeth decides to start calling her mommy and living inside her cleavage because by an astounding coincidence, her real Holy Roman Empire mom was actually a dead ringer for the blonde billionaire sex pest. As another example, in episode 9, Kuriko drags Kazuki to a fancy hot spring so she can assault him again, but also the waters there apparently have the power to increase someone's spell count. But they learn when they arrive that that's only if the person can keep their head submerged under the water for 2 straight years. Obviously, Kazuki's not gonna do that, but the spring has another secret lurking beneath its waters: baseball zombies, who, if you beat them, you can get like a bazillion spells, but then if you lose, everyone on your team goes to hells. Despite the danger, Rin and Yuna, who have of course successfully stalked Kazuki by this point, join the team, along with their teacher, who Kuriko bribes with a rare video game. But then, at the bottom of the 9th with the bases loaded, Kazuki has to use magic to throw the ball home, but he makes his throw too fast and powerful, so the baseball diamond explodes, because most of the punchlines in this show are explosions, and the zombies declare that the game is a draw, meaning that he only gets 1 spell back as a consolation prize, thus making the whole exercise filler. And that's probably the most entertaining episode of the whole show, though about 40% of that entertainment value comes from this one animation. Let me tell you, early digital anime was the wild fucking west.
I'll hop down there and escort y'all over to your roomy room.
After Kazuki's abra'd his last cadabra, Maburaho does briefly threaten to become a more interesting anime with the introduction of Shino, a crazy hot and also just plain crazy ghost collector who wants to steal our hero's soul. A recurring villain can do a lot to give a meandering plot a bit of much-needed direction, but by the second time she tricks Kazuki into coming to a place alone with her, and then tries to put his soul in a birdcage, and then Yuna bursts in and thinks he's cheating on her and tries to double murder him for that, and then she tricks him to coming to another place later and does the same thing again, which is the second episode Shino's in, it becomes clear that she's nothing more than another expansion patch for the formula. Also, at the end of that second episode, we learn that she's Dr. Akai's sister, and so, because he knows that she's trying to kidnap one of his students, he, of course, gives her a job at the school. Now, it does all work out in the end as she Green Rangers her way into Kazuki's harem and starts inviting him to bang her in the nurse's office instead of trying to kidnap him, but all that really means is that she's 2 different kinds of never let this person within 100 feet of a school. With a ghost expert around, it should be pretty clear what direction the story's gonna go from here. The harem wants Kazuki's body back, Shino knows how to do that, but won't tell because she wants him extra ghosty, so they gotta figure it out without her help, then do it while she tries to stop them. And all of that does happen in a general sense, but you gotta remember, Maburaho is not a story. It's a formulaic weekly waifu delivery system. So before it can get to that, it's gotta do an episode where Kazuki and Rin have to fight her adopted older brother / martial arts sensei, who is also a werewolf, and then he dies fighting them, and his soul goes to the moon. The next episode is about the Holy Roman Empire ghost child being suspicious because Kuriko put a talisman on her chest to stop all the ghost fondling that was going on, so she pulls the whole gang in to stalk her adopted mom while she goes on a date with a guy and then agrees to marry him, but it turns out he's actually a con artist, and then when they try to warn her about that, she gets mad at them because she was actually helping the cops do an undercover sting on that guy, which they should have known about even though she didn't tell them because obviously cops are in bed with the billionaire class. And hey, wait a sec. If there are police in this world, then how come Dr. Akai? After that, there's an episode where it's revealed that Nakamaru was actually the real boy who jizzed all along, so the entire class decides to make him their eugenics king, and he starts plotting to conquer the world while Kazuki goes off to mope in a corner because this means he's really worthless now. But then his harem shows up to reassure him that they've totally fallen in love with the void where his personality should be, as if that wasn't obvious enough from how they all didn't fuck off the second his little ghosts got ghosted. And in the end, it turns out that the whole Nakamaru thing was just an elaborate lie Shino cooked up to trick Kazuki into double killing himself, so it's a moot point anyway. Right after that, the class goes on a trip to Kyoto, where Yuna and Kazuki see one of their classmates being attacked by ninjas, whom she fights off with her crazy martial arts skills, which she has because it turns out she's part of a rival clan to Rin's family, who've been in a blood feud with them for generations over whether punches are better than swords. So, naturally, Nakamaru and Matsuda go to the local racetrack and convince the owner, who seems to be some sort of Yakuza person, to set up a fight between Rin and Sayumi that everyone bets on using chocolate, and also Sayumi is blackmailed into doing it because she's got these old poems she wrote that are really embarrassing. And the fight actually looks pretty cool for a minute, but then the animators just sort of give up halfway through and finish it with a foot race. While they're walking away from the riot that ensues when the two of them are beaten in that foot race by some monks as part of a recurring gag, Kazuki and his harem randomly bump into brown-hair childhood friend who moved to Kyoto after her episode was done, and then all four girls, to quote Wikipedia, suddenly became horny and get dragged toward Kazuki. And that random coincidence at the end of a totally unrelated comedy episode is how they figure out how to get his body back. That is, after an episode spent going on timeshare dates with Kazuki around Kyoto, because they only became horny when all five of them are together. Shino uses this situation to get Kazuki alone and try to capture him again, but Yuna and other childhood friend dive into the ghost screensaver after him, and as they're reaching out to him, his ashes, which it turns out were stuck to them all along and that's what made them horny, start flowing back, making him more solid. And from this, they intuit that Rin and Kuriko must have the rest of the ashes. So, of course, immediately after a clip show episode about the dorm manager delivering Yuna's lunch to her at school, the gang gets to work restoring the ashes. To do this, both Rin and Kuriko need to completely synchronize with Kazuki's heart, which, in practical terms, means that each of the girls has to trigger one dating sim event. For Kuriko, this entails going to a fancy dress party and learning to be more honest with her feelings after trying to get Kazuki lynched a couple times, and for Rin, it involves Kazuki just sort of standing in a forest clearing, swinging her sword up and down for hours on end as he waits for her to figure out whether or not it's even worth it to restore his ashes, because Shino told her at the last second that if she does, he's gonna lose his memory when his body comes back. You will note that this is the same last-minute complication that Fena Pirate Princess pulled out of its ass, and Surprisingly, Maburaho does slightly more with it than that show, though not nearly enough to justify stretching its finale into a two-parter. In the first part, right after Rin restores his ashes, Kazuki gets sick because not all of them have been returned after all, and his incomplete body and soul are rejecting each other, meaning he'll disappear forever if they can't find the rest of the ashes or remove the ones that he has and make him a ghost forever. We learn through a dive into Kazuki's memories that Yuna and childhood friend B actually have a shared ash pool because the obligatory twist in his childhood friend memory is that he actually promised both of them he'd make it snow in summer like a little 6-year-old fuckboy. So in order to restore the last of his ashes, both of their hearts need to be synchronized at the same time with his. But childhood friend B, who's long distance from Kazuki now and thus only has those memories connecting her to him, understandably doesn't wanna and runs away. Now, in a good anime, this would be resolved with them having some sort of heart-to-heart and getting to the real root of their feelings, but these characters and their connections to each other and Kazuki are all paper-thin, so instead of that, they mostly just throw disconnected Sakuga cuts at each other until she changes her mind. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, hey, Geoff, I get it, you don't like the show, it ruined your childhood, but you gotta be fair, that's a pretty good fight for a harem anime, you gotta give them that. But I don't, because it's not. This is. Also, every episode of Girls Bravo starts with a shower scene. You should watch that anime instead of this one, is what I'm saying. Honestly, I wanted to just make a video recommending that instead of going through all this, but trust me, it would have been demonetized faster than you can say they put a giant demon octopus in the body-swapping pool episode. Okay, I guess I can't put off talking about that Maburaho ending any longer. So, after Kazuki gets his body back, it turns out he doesn't lose his memories because his magic's just that strong. But it's so that strong that when he comes back, there's a slight complication where there's 10 of him now, which at the time that this was written may have seemed like a tidy little solution to the whole harem anime dilemma, but I've seen My Hero Academia. I know the existential horror of being twice. This shit is gonna break Protag-kun's entire brain in a matter of weeks. And that's not even the scariest thing about the whole situation. No, that would be Yuna, who is so psychotically controlling and possessive that she will not settle for anything less than a total 24/7 monopoly on all 10 Kazukis, which is only going to accelerate his twiceification and probably lead to some sort of horrific death match between all of his clones over which one of them gets to be with her. I mean, that's probably not where it actually goes in the light novels. He probably just complains about being 10 different guys for a few chapters, then gets used to it and starts enjoying himself while the girls in his life try to figure out how to fix him again, and then a sad gray chapter comes out of nowhere like Lost.jpg in the middle of a webcomic binge, and he gets a new magical malady but starts being one guy again. Wash, rinse, repeat until the money stops coming. But this is where the anime stops, and I didn't know about the light novels when I first got this DVD, so I've spent way too much time thinking through the implications of this ending, and they haunt me to this day. And now they're gonna haunt you too, along with all the eugenics and abuse and assault and horny crimes and all that other crap. And this animation. You're welcome. It's worth it, though, because by using the tools that I've equipped you with in this video, you'll be able to watch any 2000s era harem anime and instantly recognize a lot of tropes and stuff. And I don't know, maybe you'll appreciate better written harems more and possibly watch Girls Bravo and, one thing I took away from this rewatch is that mediocre anime from the mid-2000s are actually a bit higher in average quality than mediocre anime today. Despite its often fugly line art, Maburaho does at least feature interesting storyboards with multiple characters in frame doing stuff other than talking to each other through repetitive shot-reverse shot editing, but I don't know how much your typical anime watcher is actually going to care about tiny technical details like that, so yeah, I guess I kind of just wasted a whole bunch of your time. Just like this show wasted mine. Misery loves company, bitches. I'm Geoff Thew, professional wizard teacher, signing out from the horrifyingly unsafe situation I just put my students in.